I often get asked about what is the time commitment when I'm serving on a board of directors. And I think it's a really good question. And obviously, how long's a piece of string? But I'm going to try and give you some practical advice as to what I'm seeing the trends for executives who are serving in this space. On average, for each board appointment, you would be looking at the equivalent of 1 day per month in terms of work and activity. So that would be looking at board papers, reading board papers, attending obviously board meetings, and the ad hoc emails and correspondence that might sit around that. So the equivalent one day per month is a pretty good formula to work on. Now, here are the variables. So if you start to serve on committees, which is often very common when you serve on a board of directors, you'll often find that starts to, increase the workload, because committees tend to be a lot more hands-on, and you're often trying to deal with or solve particular problems. And you're often writing a lot of board papers and trying to influence board decisions into the future and inform board decisions into the future. So you'll find that when you start to serve on committees, the workload will start to move up a little bit. So for example, you'll often find that when you join a board, there's 8 official board meetings per year. You might find that there's 1 or 2 days where there's a strategy session where you might have an off-site meeting to complete the strategy work. And then if you've got your committee work, then you've got some additional hours there and additional meetings. So I know, for example, on a not-for-profit that I'm currently on, it started out at about 8 meetings, and then there's at least another 8 meetings for the committee work. There's at least another day for the strategy work, and then you have the truth of the matter, which is how much happens just around the board. And it might depend a little bit on the board scenario, but in my experience, you're on call 24/7. Typically I'll get a phone call every couple of days, and this is on a board that is relatively high performing. So, there'll be phone calls, there'll be emails to look at, you might be asked to follow up on a matter. You're constantly monitoring the organisation, you're keeping your tabs on the organisation so that any issues that are coming up, and you're really sort of monitoring the health of that organisation, because that's your responsibility as a board director. So let's maybe say there's an average of 1 day per month, and then I'm going to say there's probably another half a day for additional activity. And then if you are serving as a chair, you can double those numbers easily, because, there's a lot more work that goes into chairing a board of directors. And I really caution you to be super careful about taking on chair appointments unless you're really A, ready to do it, and B, you have the absolute freedom to allocate the time to it, because the chair has so many additional responsibilities to kind of coordinate everybody, make sure that the work is happening offline. So the work that happens outside of the formal board meetings that needs to occur to keep the business running correctly, make sure we're doing all the things right, it really is in a streamlined sort of fashion. So you've got to be super careful, because then that means, as a board member, if you're a chair, you're probably looking at about 3 days per month being allocated to each boardroom setting that you serve on. Now, if you're in an executive role, you probably would be able to manage 1 appointment outside of the workplace. But I'm really cautious on executives who have a major C-suite role holding more than 1 external board seat. And I've got a lot of people contacting me at the moment saying they want multiple 3, 4 board seats sitting alongside a CEO role or a CXO role. Look, I just don't know how you're going to do it. I think it's going to really test your limits, and you might find that 1 extra board seat really starts to put a lot of pressure on yourself and puts a lot of pressure on your personal life, and it just might take things out of balance. And you've got to take a step back as to why you might be doing that type of work, because 1 board seat might be more than enough. I know for myself personally, I run a very busy business, and I have 1 external not-for-profit, And then I have about 4 advisory board appointments that I am managing at any point in time. So I always have a little roster of clients that I'm working with, and I might be helping them with capital raisings or introductions and so on. I can tell you I'm extremely busy, and I would not want to add one extra big board seat into the mix. It would just tip the whole thing out of balance. So just be really careful on that. But that's some guidance on what I'm seeing in terms of workload and commitment. And that formula of, one board seat, 1 day per month is a good formula to base it from, and then just look at the variables and what might make it a bit different for that particular organisation or for your own personal circumstances.